Hi, my name's Kirsty Page, and in this recording, we're going to have a closer look at visual skills. And for those of you with Launchpad, visual skills will be located here in this light purple bit where we look at visual skills in two ways. Attention and discrimination, and then also visual memory. And in this recording, we're going to look mainly at practical ideas to increase the level that we work on discrimination skills, because I think it's probably the bit that is the thing that we need to do a little bit more of. We want children to learn things, and therefore we're looking for learning to happen and for things to be stored like shapes and numbers and letters in children's visual memory. But I think we can often boost visual memory and learning in children by doing more on discrimination. And as always in Launchpad, where skills fit together, the skill on the left, which is visual discrimination, will always underpin the skill on the right, which would be visual memory. So Launchpad takes us through an incremental progression, but just very quickly here, children obviously begin to discriminate and to process the visual world around them. First of all, focusing on faces, of course, that's really important, and that comes up a lot in social communication and pragmatics as well. But on objects, first of all, noticing and being able to look at big differences between objects and then smaller differences. Their visual skills, as they develop, allow a child to process pictures of increasing complexity and to move on to be able to cope with things like logos and symbols. And then where we begin to hit more what we would see as more formal learning, that ability to cope and learn shapes and numbers and letters, and not just dissimilar letters but similar letters, and obviously to move on and have word level reading as well. So like I said, we're going to focus mainly on visual discrimination. And I think if we're thinking about, well, what is visual discrimination and how do I work on it, then really it's about children's ability to look more closely and to see the detail of things, and to see when things are the same, when they're different, and to see where they're nearly the same but they're not the same, they're still different even if they're very similar. And I think we can do at whatever level we're working on, whether it be with objects or whether it be with letters or somewhere, or whether it would be somewhere in the middle like with pictures, we can do a lot more by looking more closely and by creating opportunities for children to sort and match what they see. So whatever level we're working, if we're sorting and matching, as long as we're naming and talking about what we're doing all the time, we're never going to prevent that learning. We're never going to prevent that information from being stored in a child's visual memory if the child is ready. But what we are doing is making sure that those visual discrimination skills, which will underpin that learning and underpin that memory, are in place first. And for many children who struggle with something, we actually find that the gap that is acting as a barrier is actually with visual discrimination, and that's why that learning isn't happening. So I think with all of these things, it's not a case of completely changing everything or doing everything new or different. I think what we do is we become more aware of visual skills, and we think about what our children are like and what do we do already, and does what we do already match our children's needs? Does it match all of our children's needs? Do we need to move some of our children on? Do we need to go back a bit to be a bit more inclusive and build from that point for some children? And do we make the most of the opportunities we've got, and do we make the most of those opportunities with the right children? So I mean, even if we think about something like getting things out and putting things away, the way we generally group objects, why do these things go in this basket whereas these objects go in this other basket? It's often that we tidy things away based on semantic category. These are all animals, but these are all people, or these are all vehicles. But again, as well as that vocabulary opportunity as we get things out and put things away, as we talk about kind of what's in the basket and why things go in different baskets, they create great visual opportunities as well. So what have we got? What could we make the most of? And when I'm thinking about my children's skills and where I need to be working, what else do I need to do? What might we need to do a bit more of? And making sure that the opportunities correlate with need, and as my children's skills progress, I tweak and evolve my practice, moving my children on, but understanding that I still need to go back a bit with some children. So I've got, again, this kind of inclusive but progressive edge to my thinking and to my practice. I think one of the things that is so easy to do more of is to look more closely when we're using resources. So I could pick up, two vehicles as we're playing with those areas, and I could talk about what's the same about them and what's different. So great for visual discrimination, great for vocabulary at the same time. So not only do I learn the names of what those two vehicles are called, I learn the names of the parts, and I learn descriptive vocabulary about why they are the same and why they are different. And of course, if I pick up a car and a bus, or a car and an aeroplane, the differences linguistically but also visually are kind of much more significant. But if I picked up a car and then a van, we're not just getting linguistically closer, we're also getting visually closer. And as an ex-speech and language therapist, I think I rarely considered visual skills when it came to vocabulary learning, but we have to think that children with visual discrimination issues, why do they call both a car and a van a car? Why do they call a sheep and a goat and other farm animals all the same word? Of course, it could just be a language issue, but if the child struggles to see the carness of car and the vanness of van, maybe that's another compounding factor for some of our children why they struggle to learn and store more words. I think the other thing that we can do as well is make a lot more of the picture material that we've already got. So certainly we can look for detail in pictures, and I always go back to good old favourites like Usborne First 100 or 1,000 words, where we've got the pictures around the edge, and can we find that in the bigger, busier picture? If we've got older children where we're still needing to really work on visual skills, then I can find like where's the unicorn, or where's Wally, where we've got busy pictures, but you've got to find a character or like I said, unicorns or something like that hidden within the picture. The value of things like spot the difference, and again, I can make it really visually obvious, or I can have real closer, more discreet visual differences for children to spot, are a great source of visual skills. And again, just talking about what's happening in pictures. What's this person doing? Where might they be going? Or what do you think might happen next? It's not just useful for building visual discrimination. It's great for building language, and is one of the earliest and easiest ways that I can build skills that will feed into reading comprehension. And like I said, I think we can also do a lot more sorting and matching than we already do. I think we do a lot with very young children based on colour and maybe sorting things by size. But we can create more opportunities where we sort things based on detail, where we sort things based on pattern, or whether things that have got legs or haven't got legs, or whether they've got wheels or haven't got wheels, whether things are shiny or not shiny. So again, all of this looking more closely and sorting is not just great for visual skills, it's also really, really good for building vocabulary and semantic links. And again, I think we need to remember that when we work practically, we're often building a multitude of skills in the same way at the same time, and that they can have multiple benefits for different children. So I'm not saying that visual memory is not important. I just think we probably focus on that one anyway. What I am going to throw in before we end is the value of going back to some old-fashioned practice and building children's visual memory skills with groups of objects. And certainly on Launchpad, I actually explicitly talk about playing more Kim's game, which is where you put objects on a tray, 4, 5 objects depending, and then you talk about what they are, you have a good look at them, and then you cover them up and remove one along with the cover. That can be really valuable for building visual discrimination skills beyond just looking at one thing at a time, but also building that visual memory around a group of objects, which will be fundamentally important to support children moving on to digraphs, trigraphs, and word level reading. And also, in another video, we talk about the importance of sequential auditory memory. Can children listen to words? Can they hold those words, and can they hold them in the right order? A really important skill, which is similar but different, is children's visual sequential memory. So if we were threading and I'd done a pattern where I'd done blue, red, yellow, can children look at that pattern and can they recreate that pattern? And maybe to begin with, could they just recreate a pattern of 2? And remembering, if I say blue, red, yellow and talk the children through it, I am using visual memory and I'm using auditory sequential memory as well. If I want to just focus on sequential visual memory, I want to show them and say, look, I did that one, and that one. I'm not naming the colours here. I'm just either saying nothing or I'm using non-specific vocabulary, then taking it away and saying, can you make a necklace like mine? And at that point, I am more likely to be targeting sequential visual memory. And for many of our children who struggle to move on with word level reading, it can be higher level visual discrimination gaps that are acting as barrier, but also this essence of sequential visual memory. And again, this has implications for maths. If I can't see the sequence and remember the sequence, I am going to think that 28 looks the same as 82. So if we're thinking, should we prioritise visual skills? Are visual skills important? Yes, they are, very much for literacy, very much for phonics and word level reading, but they have implications for children far outside of literacy too. Thank you.